This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Hing.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Welcome to OBO Radio, the heart of it all on the Contact Talk Radio Network, where we explore the power of love, unity, courage, and compassion. Are you ready? Join the OBO team to focus on solutions, sacred practices, and the key players who are busy creating a world that works for all.
Welcome to OBO Radio, the heart of it all on the Contact Talk Radio Network. I'm your host, Eric Lawyer, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Sherry Herndon, Laura Fox, and Daniel Sanjata, all from the OBO team. So we're a little bit different kind of show because we're bringing in the collective intelligence and the collective wisdom and knowledge of several of our team members, and we'll be rotating through on different shows depending on the context of the show and what we each have to offer. So today we're going to be looking at the truth movement, and we'll be also touching in on the Occupy movement. And to set the context of this, OBO Radio it's a new show, and where we're really going with this is following the arc of evolution, and it's kind of following my personal transformation and the evolution, the different kind of awareness and awakenings I've had from, basically not being aware of a shadow government to becoming aware of a shadow government to becoming aware of 9/11 truth in a different light, and then having an awakening to a spiritual side and a unity consciousness that I wasn't aware of either. And so that's right now we're really in the beginning of that, and starting with addressing the truth movement and seeing where that's going. So we're very honored today to have an amazing guest. He's a good friend of mine. His name's Richard Gage. He's an AIA and is a San Francisco Bay Area architect and a member of the American Institute of Architects. He is the founding member of AE 9/11 Truth. He has been practicing architect for over 20 years and has worked on most types of building construction, including numerous fire-protected steel frame buildings. Most recently, he worked on the construction documents for a $400 million mixed-use urban project with a 1.2 million square feet of retail, parking structure, and 320,000 square feet of mid-rise office space. Mr. Gage became interested in researching the destruction of the World Trade Center high-rises after hearing the startling conclusions of a reluctant 9/11 researcher, David Ray Griffin, on the show in 2006, which launched his own unyielding quest for the truth about 9/11. So welcome, Richard, and it's awesome to have you here today.
Thanks, Eric. It's great to be here with you and with Daniel.
And we also have Sherry Herndon and Laura Fox. So Richard and I, like we said, we've worked together quite a bit in the 9/11 Truth movement, and Richard actually came to my wedding, so I consider him a really good friend. It's awesome to have him here, and this, like I said, Richard, is a little bit different, and I know Richard and I in the past have really really gone deep into the evidence and the investigation, what physical evidence is there. Today I've invited Richard in to do it a little bit different and kind of open it up to more of a discussion, and I want to frame it kind of where I'd like to go today, and for all of us to kind of participate where we feel drawn to jump in and really lead. So through my evolution and my different awakenings to these different pieces, I've kind of stepped back now and looked at it from a different viewpoint, and I've simplified it as simple as fear and love. And when I was operating from fear, it created certain behaviors, or it kind of controlled me in a way. I became angry. I wanted to go to war. Then when I awakened to the truth movement and saw a shadow government, I wanted to bring them down. It was all about us versus them mentality. And I've shifted there. And so when I look back now, I look at, how did we get here? How did we get to where, as a collective society, we're really letting fear run our lives and run our systems? And so, it's, there's no blame or shame. It's just I'm stepping in from a responsibility point and saying, how can I help shift this? And so when I look back, and this is why I'm addressing why we have so many people here today. When I look back, we look at the wars, wars that have been created. And most of those leaders in the wars have been predominantly male. We look at corporations, predominantly male. We look at bankers that are that have been running the central banks and controlling a lot of things from the financial side, mostly male. And we look at the 9/11 Truth movement, mostly male. It's predominantly male. So, and we see these things, I see this repeating itself, and what the pattern that I'm noticing is we're not, I haven't been really inviting in the female energy on a lot of the things I've been doing. And so when I was crying for war, I wasn't really listening to the voices that had other possibilities. And in the 9/11 Truth Movement, when I was calling for heads to roll, I wasn't really listening to other possibilities. So with that, I feel like the next step are, in order for us to really move through this and come together and really start looking at this from collective responsibility and, and really move through all this, we have to deal with a few injustices. So I don't look at the 9/11 truth as something I'm stepping away from or ignoring. And some of those injustices, 3 of them, in particular to me, are what we collectively have done to the indigenous people, what we've done to, women in the last few thousand years and couple thousand years, and what has happened with 9/11. I feel those are 3 key things that really have to be addressed. So the reason why I have Richard here today is 9/11 is one of the most current ones, and it's obviously a very potent, and it's really growing in momentum, the awareness of what happened or what didn't happen with the investigation and where we really are with this. So the framing kind of direction it would be the direction of the truth movement, what I'd like to get in the conversation today with everybody, and really look to Richard for his experience here, because he's been deeply involved in it for years. And he's really, if you were to look at the 9/11 Truth Movement, I think Richard's really added the most credibility and really the most honest, and just really stays focused on the facts. He doesn't bring in emotion. He doesn't bring in conspiracy theories. He stays with what he knows, and he's really amazing that way. And so that's why I really, would like to pick his brain on where we go from here. And so when the Truth Movement, reaches critical mass, which I think we're getting close, we're relatively close, and I'd like Richard to speak on that in a moment. We're gonna be collectively faced with a choice, and that choice is we get to choose the old way, which is the predominantly male way, which would be, like Daniel and I had talked about last week, would be a Nuremberg type trial, where we have, an international trials, and we look for basically for heads to roll, and we just want to pin this on, we want to be able to point the finger at somebody and say they were responsible. Well, if we looked at Nuremberg, we really didn't get to the root of the problem. I look at it as kind of like in the real world as a weed whacker. The male way came in, we whacked a whole bunch of weeds, but we never got to the root of the problem. And now we have a choice. Now we have the option to collectively step back, because we are getting close to that point, and we're going to be guiding this collectively, where we go with this when the truth really does, come out, and when people accept responsibility. And what I see now is we have the opportunity, instead of a weed whacker and going after just a few weeds, we have the opportunity to build a beautiful garden. And really, it's like a community garden where we all step in, we all bring our gifts, and we all cultivate it in a different way.
And seeds.
What's that?
I said plant new seeds. I love the way you just put that. That's a great metaphor, Eric. Continue.
Thank you, Daniel. And we're just about to bring everybody in. So that's where I'd like this to kind of go, is all of us stepping in, the voices here, and that's why Sherry and Laura are here. Daniel, Richard, and I have really been looked at as, Richard leading the way, and Daniel and I have been voices in the 9/11 Truth Movement too, but we've brought one perspective. And so Laura and Sherry haven't spent as much time in the whole 9/11 truth as the facts and figures and all that, and really that on this show doesn't matter. It's more, we all agree that something happened there and that it needs to be addressed. So once it is addressed, how do we do that? And so the framing question would be, what does justice look like, and how do we create it? How do we create a new way of being, a new way of looking at this, where really we can move through this and not into a new world where we invite in the perspectives of everybody, where everybody feels like justice has been served, but not from a violent, off with their heads, but really feel, I guess the way I feel is, I really believe the best way to honor all those who've been lost in all the wars and 9/11 and everything else is not to continue the killing, not to continue the destruction, but to really step in and create a world that works for everybody, where we're all protected, we're all listened to, and we all feel heard. So, and that's kind of where it's at, is where does the Truth Movement go from here, and what does justice look like? So I'd like to open it up with Richard, just kind of sharing your background and what brought you into the Truth Movement, and the different emotions you've experienced and where you're at right now.
All right. Quite quite a question.
Yes. Hey, don't feel like you have to have the entire answer. It's going to be more of a discussion, and we're just going to keep this organic, and we'll go as things pop up for people.
Well, I also do not want to presume that all of your listeners know why 1,600 architects and engineers find themselves compelled to risk their reputations to blow the whistle on the official explanations of the destruction of all 3 World Trade Center high-rises on 9/11. So I do want to share that information, and I'll do it as quickly as I can. But I started 5 years ago when I heard this radio program that you mentioned here in Berkeley. It was just shocking to me. I'd never heard any alternative explanation as to how the towers came down. I didn't know about the 3rd worst structural failure in modern history, World Trade Center 7. This is a 47-story skyscraper that in the afternoon of 9/11 dropped suddenly, symmetrically, smoothly, straight down into its own footprint almost, and at free fall acceleration. In other words, as fast as a bowling ball drops off the side of this building, it is completely destroyed, folded over like a house of cards, all in just about 7 seconds from top to bottom. Now, we have seen this before, and this is what we've seen in the hotel fires. For instance, the hotel in Las Vegas, the controlled demolition of the old hotels. So everybody knows what this is once they see it, but it has never been played on TV before. So you've got to see this in order to believe it. Look at our website. We show many of the films, video clips that were shown the first day of 9/11, but then were stricken from the record, if you will, such that most architects and engineers know nothing about it. They're just shocked to even learn that a 47-story skyscraper was also destroyed. So the website is ae911truth.org. That stands for Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, ae911truth.org. Now, the authorities, 7 years later in their final report, blame normal office fires for this building's failure, presumably started by some of the debris from the Twin Towers that came down earlier and managed to hit many of the buildings up to 600 feet away. We'll get to that in a moment. So the architects and engineers that I began to tell about this starting 5 years ago with my own firm, I paid for pizza and made them come and watch this presentation that I stole from Stephen Jones, and all of them thought I was nuts before the presentation, and all of them agreed with me afterward that all 3 of these buildings were brought down by controlled demolition. So I was off to a very good start, and now we have 1,600 in it. Compare that to a couple of dozen engineers who are actively supporting the official story. You can see how information can be controlled when it is in the hands of the few. And so we have a problem with our media, and that's the reason we don't have 50,000 architects and engineers calling for a new investigation, is because they do not know about it yet. It's very difficult for us to get the word out. The media is not picking up this story. Like, for instance, the documentation by FEMA, in May of 2002 of the melting of steel, like Swiss cheese, intergranular melting, molten iron invading the grain boundaries of the steel beams in World Trade Center 7.
Partially evaporated steel columns.
Yeah, partially evaporated steel columns. It's extraordinary. They actually document it. But then when NIST takes over the investigation, they throw that part out, along with the other evidence of explosions and molten iron found in the basement of all 3 skyscrapers. So we have some serious problems with the official story, and that bleeds over into the Twin Towers quite easily, which, when observed, we find a very explosive event where 4-ton perimeter wall units are being hurled at 70 miles an hour, instant speed out of the side of the towers, landing 600 feet away. We have upward, outward arching streamers followed by thick pyroclastic-like clouds in a geometry that's more evocative of fireworks than any kind of a gravitational collapse. Remember, gravity works downward. Gravity would pull all 110 floors of the Twin Towers down into a pile of some shape on the bottom. But that's not what happened. We have the complete pulverization of 90,000 tons of concrete, and which is spread in a 3-mile area throughout lower Manhattan, and no floors stacked up at the bottom. What these photos and videos show is a 2-story pile of rubble. So there's 118 first responders who are describing sounds of explosions, seeing flashes of light at the onset of destruction. There's isolated explosive ejections occurring down below the so-called collapse that are 20, 40, 60 stories below, and ejecting at 160 to 200 feet per second. These are explosive speeds.
Right.
There is molten iron microspheres found in all the World Trade Center dust. These are the size of a diameter of a human hair. They're molten iron. That means they sustain temperatures twice that of what jet fuel or office fires can even produce. And yet there's no explanation for them, save the international scientists, a team led by Niels Harrit, who found in all the World Trade Center dust also small chips, red-gray chips of nanothermite. In other words, these have materials in them that are 1,000 times smaller than the human hair. Nanoparticles of iron oxide and aluminum powder intimately mixed in the perfect proportion to become what? Thermite. Thermite is an incendiary used by the military to cut through steel like a hot knife through butter. So we have all of the evidence for the explosive destruction of all 3 of these towers, and it is overwhelming, and everybody who has an open mind gets it. And so we've had great luck convincing, not luck, but
effectiveness,
success, convincing 90% of our, on average, of our viewers when we've done presentations, 200 of them now,
and Richard,
throughout the world, and to groups of 100 to 700.
I want to ask you something else, because you have, I mean, you were the sole voice in the 9/11 piece that really helped me see it in a different way and helped me start investigating it more from a fact-based instead of just the different theories and all the things out there. So I remember going to your first presentation. You know, I started learning about this in one day, and 2 days later I was at your presentation, just happened to be nearby. And so I've, I'd agree, the evidence is absolutely overwhelming, and anybody who hasn't looked definitely needs to watch, your all the different videos you've produced, and the, even the presentation we did together. It gets really deep into the, the investigation, the evidence. It is
Richard has one of the most informative websites available. Actually, all your listeners who aren't familiar or who would like to actually see a careful laying out of everything that Richard just went through should go to ae911truth.org. I believe it is, Richard. ae911truth.org. And
right.
and watch Richard's video and go through the evidence for yourself and share it with others. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Eric, but something that was burning in my mind as I was listening to you, Richard, is I was wondering, I've often heard you speak. I've been following your work for years. It's a tremendous honor to be on here with you today, by the way, and I have such respect and admiration and genuine love for you, even though we don't really know each other that personally. But something I've always wondered, I've only ever heard you deliver the information, the proof of the explosive demolition of the towers, but I haven't ever really heard you speak as you about how it makes you feel, how it made you feel at the time that once you started really uncovering these anomalies and distortions of the official story, and what it insinuates, what you think it means from a contextual standpoint. Let's assume that you guys have the right answer, and moving forward, not moving forward so much, but what do you think that fact says about America in a larger context, or about, I don't know, the world in a larger context? And how did it make you feel at the time?
Well, at the time I was really in a state of shock hearing this information for the first time. I mean, it was cold. There was no question in my or anybody else's mind that 19 fundamentalist hijackers slammed those planes into the building, and the jet fuel melted or softened the steel, and it came down. That was a mental construct that was delivered to us by the experts, and most all of us architects and engineers swallowed it whole without thinking, because we were in a state of shock at the time. Our country was under attack. We didn't. It's pain. We're in pain. We're in cognitive dissonance. The world is not the same anymore. Everything just changed. 3,000 people had died, and we want answers, and in that state of mind, and we're going to accept them, especially when they come, from the experts who have the answers right away.
Right.
So I know I was in a state of shock at the time. I didn't feel myself going into fear or anger as I developed the response to the call which I felt from within to do something. I really didn't have a choice. It was as if everybody in line, and people are in line, and they ask for volunteers, and everybody else stepped back. And there I am,
the last one there.
Looking to the left and the right without any support, initially. And I just knew what I had to do. We had, at the time, Scholars for 9/11 Truth, Pilots for 9/11 Truth, a couple of other groups, and it was just obvious that these are buildings, for crying out loud. We've got to get the architects and engineers on board. So I feel compelled to continue getting the word out there, but
It's interesting that you said you didn't come from a place of anger or fear. So I think that's even more admirable. To me, that means you came either from a place of neutrality or love, even from the very beginning. And now that you say that, I have to say I never really got much anger from you in watching any of your presentations. You did just kind of seem like you were there doing what you felt needed to be done from a moralistic and an ethical standpoint. That always made me respect you even more. I also wanted to ask, though, Richard, what do you think then, let's say we've been lied to. Let's at least assume that, regardless of who's actually ultimately responsible. What do you think the implications are of the fact that so much effort has gone into making the American people believe one thing when something else was actually the fact of the matter?
Well, that was the wake-up call, I would say, more than anything. It wasn't just that, hey, these buildings were blown up. It's that there is obviously a cabal of individuals with dark, nefarious plans that have been executed in manipulating Americans and our Congress to go to war. It's extremely disturbing, it was for me, that so many people could be fooled, including myself. And the world is not the same. I'm living in George Orwell's 1984, what I thought, and it's as if the rug got pulled out from underneath my worldview. I'm not living in the same society as I thought I was. Nothing is going to be the same until this gets rectified. Little did I know it would be 5 years later, 10 years after 9/11 truth, after 9/11, that we would still be swimming upstream trying to awaken the American people. I thought, oh my God, as soon as the media gets this story...
the biggest news story ever.
Yeah, it is. This is the story of the century.
Well,
and yet we can't get it broke in any of the mainstream media, and even local media.
Right.
Very difficult.
And that's
to pick it up.
That brings me to what you just said, back to what you said originally, Richard, was the media is not picking up the story. So that kind of leads it into where I think one thing we can all agree on is that the system's broken and it's not working. And so, the justice system, whatever system we look, all of our major systems are broken. So knowing what you know now, because you've tried, and I know personally, I've, worked with you on these things to reach like NIST, and you've tried going through all the proper legal channels that exist within the system, and you keep hitting roadblocks. I'd like you to kind of talk on that, but not so much, I'd like to just briefly identify what those roadblocks are, but what you see is what are solutions that where I'm going with this is I feel like we can't expect the system that has created this problem to begin with to solve it for us. We have to step up and solve it. So what does that look like? Like, what do you think, what's the best way for us to start getting this information out, but do it, obviously the way we're doing is not working. It's working a little bit, but it hasn't produced the results in the time that we thought it would. It's just exactly what you talked about. So is there can we brainstorm here, like other ways to really get the information out, not so much leave people in that fear standpoint, like, oh, here's this, this secret cabal that just did this, but okay, we know they did this, but what would the system look like that would prevent this from happening in the future? What does that look like? And so if you could just briefly touch on your personal experience with those roadblocks and solutions you might see that exist right now.
Sure. Well, what we have done is visited the offices of at least 3 dozen congresspersons and senators and given presentations. And we have given every congressperson personally, not personally, but delivered to their offices, our DVD and our brochure and letter and our petition. And we've issued press releases for the last 5 years throughout the country explaining this information, and that we're having speaking engagements, which have been done now at over 30 universities. You're right. It has not yielded the results that we need, and the next big effort we're doing is going directly to the universities as a speaker, as opposed to being on campus at a rented venue by a local 9/11 Truth group. We're going to be marketing this message because we feel it's time that it's been enough time. There's been enough hearsay about conspiracy theories, if you will, and then we're going to be marketing the message to try to help them put the conspiracy theories to rest and look at the science. So we hope that'll be helpful. I do not have a vision that is the answer as to what will be the breakthrough. We know we want a new investigation. Who do we trust to have that investigation?
Right.
We can't even name a body right now that we can trust, international or American. An authoritative body with enough power for subpoena power and so forth. We know
and then once we have that investigation, do we approach it from a patriarchal standpoint, as Eric pointed out at the beginning of the show, or do we try something else this time because it hasn't worked in the past? I wonder that. Do we just hold our version of Nuremberg trials, war crimes tribunals, send people to jail, hang people for treason? If that's the approach that we take towards this, then what good will that ultimately do? Will that solve the problem? And if not, then what does a different model look like going into the future? I wonder that.
Yeah. And how do we even get to the point where we could have such a model without the support of any congressman
right.
or any major media figures? So let's brainstorm the solution. I'll be a player in that discussion, but I don't find myself an effective leader in that discussion.
No, and that's that's the thing is I think what's working with the Occupy movement is there's no one leader, and that's the beauty of this. How we're going to change it is what's put us in this position is for me personally, I believe the experts like you talked about and a few key leaders that I thought had the answers, and I don't think there is any one of us that has it. So that's why yeah, I love that part of you, Richard, is you know what you know and you stick with that, but that's what we're inviting in. And so kind of going back to that framing question it was a question that, and I don't know if you ever met him, the captain of the military intelligence, Richard Gregory. I don't think you ever did, but he asked me this question a couple of years ago, and it's really what set me up for this latest kind of evolution was if we do it the way we've done it, we're going to have the same world we had, and we now have to start thinking of a different way to do it. So what is more important? And this is what Marek, the spiritual energy healer that really has worked with me a lot, asked me, is what's more important, to have the trials and believe we know the truth and have people punished for it, or to really begin changing the system and create the world that we say we want? So that's where it's at. So I guess what I want to open up right now is what's more important to, and that's where I'm getting clear, and Daniel and I talked about it last week, what's more important to us? Someone paying a penalty for what happened, or us really as humanity stepping in and becoming collectively aware, totally aware and awake of what humanity is possible, what's possible when we step out of it, when we disconnect from our heart, disconnect from our communities, disconnect from each other, we allow this evil to just flourish and just take over. Now we're seeing people, people full of love and people like you, Richard, that are really standing up and taking responsibility. It's beginning to change it, but now we have to really come together and go, where do we go with this? So I would say, what I want to open up is, what does this look like? I mean, do we have, I feel like you've really presented a lot of evidence, and do we have, where communities come together, we start looking at the evidence, I think it's more, for me, it's more of an awareness, but really we need to come together with what we want the new system to look like. So have you thought much about what, if you get your day in court or your day in the trial, you're one of the expert presenters there, what do you want to happen once people know the truth now?
Well, if people see the evidence, and the majority of Americans who are willing, look at the evidence, see it, and we do get some investigation that is credible and presented to the American people, I imagine that they're going to be upset enough to change their elected representatives who allowed all of this to happen, blindly or consciously, either way. So that's one thought I have, is that we will have a new government if every elected representative almost is replaced with somebody who truly represents the people. But I don't know how that can happen without a replacement of the media, which tends to control the electoral process through manipulation and selective coverage. So I don't think I'm getting quite at your question, but I'm taking.
I think he is. I think you are. I think you are very much so, Richard. I think that what you're speaking to is the necessity of cleaving, whether it be in the media, whether it be between corporations and our elected officials. I mean, you're right. If we have whatever our unitive justice model is, or punitive justice, whatever it is that people decide to go through with, I think that what you're saying basically just indicates the fact that we have to cleave all these internal conflicts of interest from our systems of governance. Otherwise, the systems will never work as they were designed to, as they were intended to, as reflections of the voice of the people. If foreign corporations can give unlimited sums of political contributions and influence American elections, if corporations retain the rights of immortal citizens with all of the rights but none of the responsibilities, and exert such undue influence over our politicians, if those very same corporations control the media, if GE, which owns NBC and is also a military manufacturer, is giving us the nightly news and telling us what's going on in Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria or Iran, are we really going to get an unbiased, presentation of that? Until we undo these things, we won't have a system that will work in a pluralistic, egalitarian, humanitarian way for everybody in American society or the world. So I think we have to I personally think we need to find a way to get at the root of those things. Otherwise, we'll be left with, we can send a certain number of people to jail, we can punish a certain number of people, but if the same system that gave rise to the problems that we face today remains in place, we haven't gotten to the root of the problem. We've approached it with a weed whacker. Right. I think that's where we really need to get Sarah, what have you thought about when you have, contemplated not necessarily what a new model of justice looks like, but what a new world looks like, what a new system looks like. What kind of thoughts have come to you in your moments of imagining that?
Yeah, that's perfect. And I was going to bring Sherry in right now, too, for that exact reason, because Sherry has experience in...
I'm so sorry. I said Sarah. I apologize. Sherry. Sorry.
I like that name. That's okay.
Sorry. You're like, well, first of all, my name is Sherry. Let's start there, Mr. Patriarchy. Sorry.
It's actually, it's better than Shelley, so Sarah, I resonate with better. So I just want to, there's a lot of really amazing juiciness here, and I wanted to speak to, there's a quote that is a deep mantra for me in terms of how I see the world through this world view. So it's important, I think what Eric did at the beginning was so powerful in terms of the framing is having us look at our world view. So depending on the world view that we hold will determine how we actually see what is possible or not possible. And when I think about a lot of people hold worldviews that they'd never question. And I think what's happening in these times as a kind of awakening on the planet is that we are dropping old worldviews that have created these systems that are clearly no longer working. And Buckminster Fuller's quote that I love is, if you don't like the current system, don't fight it. Build a new one that makes the old one obsolete. So there is, in that, when I think about the awakening that we were talking about earlier, Richard, you mentioned, awaken the people to the facts, to the truth, okay? So there are these levels of awakening. That is one level to me. I awoke to that in the 90s because these stories keep coming up. And they're kind of the same story of a system that doesn't work, that doesn't actually represent our higher values, our true nature. And they've been kind of built and designed on sort of our lower selves. And now we're awakening to, so another level of that awakening. So there's the truth of what happened. And then there is, wow, now let's take a little bit of that energy, not just to the punitive, what you were saying, like, is it unitive or punitive? There's another quote that I heard during the WTO that stuck with me. It was Tom Hayden, who was one of the Chicago Seven and then a senator from California. He was standing in front of the jail. 500 people had been put in that jail for civil disobedience. We were all out front in a circle, consensus circle, and he said, "It is not enough to slow the rate of destruction. We must increase the rate of creation." And when I think about creation, I think about our destiny as a species. Certainly, this democratic system is not the most evolved form. In fact, even Gandhi said, when asked, "What do you think about Western democracy?" and he said, "Well, I think that would be a good idea." It's that it is not enough. What we currently say we have that is enough. And then I'll just leave this last little piece because the solutions, we're going to just be unfolding this conversation. We're just like setting up the container for OBO Radio here to continue to like hold these grounding questions which are so pivotal for us as a culture, as a nation and as a global species to wake up to what are we actually capable of creating? That to me is like where I love to go, because it is not so much the particulars as in the universality of our potential that is really the most interesting thing. And I don't think that we give ourselves enough space because we focus so much on what's either not working that we don't even recognize or experience how it feels to say, wow, anything we imagine, we can create. It's like the economic system. Oh my God, let's complain all about it we can possibly imagine. And then let's say, you guys, this was created. It wasn't just them over there. It was created. We lived in it. And then now we're kind of looking at it going, this really doesn't work. So let's put our genius and our brilliance and our beauty and our divine essence into the questions of believing in ourselves. So that's just all I wanted to just add to that.
Beautiful. You know, I hate to ascribe the word value to 9/11. It seems like just a wrong association of words. But to me, what you've just spelled out is it is what 9/11's real value to us is, more so than the type of justice that we seek in pursuing the truth about 9/11. 9/11's the fact that it is a point of leverage for breaking previously held worldviews and opening up new possibilities, new choices, and in doing that, opening up the very real possibility for creating a new world. That to me is, I agree with you, that is the most exciting, that's the crest of the wave of what is happening right now, not only with 9/11 Truth, with the Occupy movement. The more we can help, that's why it's so awesome, Eric, that you're doing this show. I think that you're going to do so much good helping people redirect misappropriated and misdirected energies in a more constructive direction.
Awesome thing, and it's us doing this show. We're all there's pieces here that I can't even begin to articulate. So,
you're too humble, my man. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be talking right now.
Thanks, Daniel. And you're amazing. And with that, I wanted to, since Daniel brought in Sarah, Sherry. But
my new identity.
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's like Sarah from Terminator. Remember?
No, Sarah from the ancient times. It's a great old
It's your
name.
avatar, huh?
Yes.
And what I'd like to hear from Laura, check in. Laura's down in California right now, so just want to hear if you have any words of wisdom.
Yes, thank you. Yes, in listening to everyone today, I'm first off want to really acknowledge you, Eric, and thank you for bringing in the acknowledgement around wanting to reintegrate the voice of the divine feminine.
Yes.
And I was looking at the I Ching this morning, and my friend was showing me how when the masculine hexagram of the three solid lines is on top of the feminine with the broken line, what you get is chaos, disharmony, and disorder, and misfortune. When this divine masculine is supporting the feminine receptive energies, then you get harmony, peace, and cooperative, loving environment. So this is not to say that one would be dominant over another, but that yin and yang within us, that male and female in us, if we can create that foundation and that platform of the solid, positive male energy and allow our receptivity and the voice of the feminine to spring off of that, then we're going to really start to learn how to rebalance ourselves here. And so thank you for allowing this feminine voice to speak to this issue, which I think really what Sherry and Daniel were saying really set up what I wanted to say beautifully, because it has to do with healing. And as someone who's been deeply involved with healing on a personal level and with others and with groups for many years now, really since I was a teenager, I'm really noticing that the core of the issue is where we need to go. Why? There's two levels of it that I'd like us to look at and consider and possibly do a whole show on. What is it about us that allows us to be so blinded to energies that would be allowed to accumulate to such a degree that we would turn our heads and have to experience such a huge, huge manifestation of the negative energy where we're disempowered and disenfranchised from each other and from life in such a powerful way? Are we addicted to things that allow us to turn our head the other way as these things are building because we created a false kind of comfort? Do we have wounds that keep us in a position of inferiority to those we think of as in authority? You know, really we need to get to the core of what is it in each of us that has allowed this manifestation to occur, and then to take responsibility for it, and like Sherry was saying, like Daniel was reiterating, begin to learn how to build the new together, and to really step into the responsibility that each of us has to A, heal ourselves, B, hold space for collective healing, and C, step into that co-creative process where we can actually build the new together. And then the second thing I just want to touch on briefly is that we also need to look at the so-called perpetrators in this case, those ones who have set up these kinds of things that are so extreme. We have to notice that they are coming from a place of extreme disconnection. So as we're learning to heal ourselves, many of us, we're learning to recreate that connection with our source in our heart. And someone who can do the kinds of things that people who set up 9/11 did cannot have a connection with their source that helps them be aware that what they do affects all of life and that all of life is connected to them. They must, in essence, at a very core level, be extremely disconnected. So what is our role in holding space for a reconnection, and in the meantime leveraging that wisdom and discernment that allows us to make good choices while there are people still so extremely disconnected that they would do such things? How do we learn together to hold space and not punish in the usual sense, which would just cause more separation, to deal with the issue and cause there to be a space for a possibility of healing for those disconnected beings who are willing to step forward again. So I'd love to explore these things further with you all in upcoming conversations.
Wow. I remember having a conversation with Marek during the event event in Seattle that you so beautifully planned and carried out, Eric. We were talking about just this very same subject, and he said to me, I was expressing some anger. I said, if I think about Dick Cheney for more than 2 or 3 minutes, in a certain way, my blood starts boiling. Even though I want to come from a place of love, it makes it really hard sometimes. And he said, perhaps they can be changed. And he just left it there. And I was like, my initial reaction was like, what? Are you crazy? Like, that's what it was in my mind. I'm like, changed. But he was right. You know what I mean?
Well, my friends, the Ginger Ninjas have a song called "Dick Cheney Needs More Love." You can go on YouTube and find it.
So do we.
We all do. Oh, awesome! Thank you. So, Richard, I know this is a little different than you're used to, so I'd like to check in with you again and see where you are with solutions or ideas on where to go with the truth movement. Besides different ways, and I'd like to kind of bring it back maybe to the media piece of it, because that's really, we're working with some other groups that we're going to be announcing here in the next week or two that are really focusing on that piece of it. And so, do you have any ideas of ways to become more effective that are not directly related to the mainstream media? Have you seen things, experienced things, or thought of things that might help? Not just the truth movement, but the bigger picture here of what's going on too. Have you just
we find in our presentations, at some point I've given out the evidence, and half the people in the room, or a quarter of them, those who weren't already familiar with the evidence, find themselves stunned. And those are the people who ask the first question. And it is really, as I think Daniel said so well earlier, that this information about 9/11, it breaks previously held worldviews. And people are left with their jaws open when they get this. And it's for me too. It was consciousness shifting, and so I think the first shift is out of an old paradigm where we thought the world was operating, in particular the United States government and media was operating benevolently and managed by decent people. And when that rug is pulled out from under, it creates a vacuum. And I think that's the growth opportunity for consciousness. And what people tend to do after they get over their shock is they want to do something. And you ask about the media, since they're not doing their job, many people in the 9/11 truth movement and other truth movements are becoming the media. And that is an aspect of taking creation, as has been discussed here in this conversation, and going and making the new system by announcing, what isn't working about the old system and what the new solutions are. In the case of fluoride, for instance, in the water, which is some people's issue, there are alternatives to with water purifiers. That's at a kind of a physical level. With 9/11, there are other solutions via consciousness, because we can't solve the problem at the level of the problem. Like you said, we'll be in fear, we'll be reacting out of fear or anger. We have to elevate our consciousness and open to a new system, a new way of presenting the information, and a new way of allowing the information to come down into new forms, and by being open and receptive to what is the replacement. Is our Constitution capable of supporting a new system? Many people, a renewed system. Many people don't think so. They want to evolve to the next level of a governmental structure, if you will. And some people, of course, want no structure. But I believe the answers to these questions are in consciousness. And I understand that we are heading into a time now, 2012 and so forth, where ideas and inspirations and consciousness is increasing, and we're going to have greater capacity for bringing in the new. So I'm really up for that, although I am not able to speak about it well.
Well, it's thank you so much, and we're just about out of time. And I just honor the work you've been doing, and what I'd like to invite in is, and I know you're really open all the time to take it to the next level, is just being open to the conversations as these continue, because I think you're holding a big piece of this, and we're working with other groups that are too. And as we come together more, I think we need to hear all the different voices, because you bring a lot of wisdom of a system that's not working from one level, and by knowing what's not working, you can help create what is working. And so I'd just like to invite that in and just thank everybody here. And if anyone has one last word they'd like to say, jump in quick. Otherwise, we're going to be anybody.
Thanks. I'm just feeling great for the power that I feel building, and it's not the power over energy, it's the power from within, and that we're getting to build that power from within together is really beautiful.
And I want to also just honor that I've experienced in this call the integration of the masculine and the feminine, and the honoring of the collective wisdom that's present in groups. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, everybody. And this is OBO Radio, the heart of it all, on Contact Tech Radio, signing out. And next week, there'll be Daniel and I back, and we'll be talking more about who Marek is and that piece of the evolution of what's happening in both of our lives. So look forward to that, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you for listening to OBO Radio's The Heart of It All. To plunge deeper into ideas, inspiration, and activities for living as love in action, visit OBO's website at onebecomingone.org.